My first question, there has been several complaints by members of the public that government's communication on key policies are very shambolic. Please, how are you going to address this issue?
Chairman, thank you. We always have to remember where we are coming from so that we are well placed in measuring the adequacy of where we are and where we seek to go. As at the 7th of January 2017, there was no information ministry. When my former boss, the Honorable Dr. Hamid, was given the mandate, the first thing was to literally rebuild the ministry, rebuild its structures, put its departments in place, and get it to a level where, under this new structure, you could start getting information and putting it out there. We have come a very long way from thence. Today, the next set of challenges that we have to deal with is to improve the rate at which we get information from the ministries, departments, and agencies. Because remember, the truth is that if you do not have the information, you will not be able to proactively put it out. And so, in accordance with the strategic plan, as I mentioned, we are getting to the next step, which deals with getting the PROs of the ministries retrained, retooled, gingered up, and developing clear channels where, on a week-by-week basis, they can channel to us the policies and programs that are going on in their ministry so that we are appraised of it. And then now our job is to develop the channels or the platforms to put it out so that, as is being said, when people are looking for government information out there, they can get it. We desire to follow the plan and to get that done.
Thank you. Some sections of the Ghanaian populace are skeptical of the Right to Information bill. I think my colleague, Honorable Minister, indicated that. But my concern is to get the good people of this country to understand, because some don't even understand what the bill is all about. So if you are approved and you become a substantive minister, what are you going to do to ensuring that people really understand the law? Thank you.
Chairman, thank you. The draft bill has a provision for the ITI Commission. And again, in the draft, one of the first functions of the commission is to do a lot of public education and engagement with stakeholders on what the bill is, what the commission is about, and on the procedures by which you can access information. Again, as was alluded to by one of my colleagues here, the expectation is that when that bill is done, minister in the bill will be defined as Minister for Information, which will mean that my ministry will be seized with the power to assist the commission to do this education and to engage all stakeholders. And if all of these happen, I commit that I will do my best to ensure that the commission does the necessary education for people to understand really what the bill is about and what sort of opportunities it gives all of us. Not just the media. I even think that the bill is very significant for academia, because for those in academia, often when you are looking for information to do academic papers, you are literally at the mercy of people in public organizations who want to provide you with information. But if we pass this bill into law and it now literally spells out or compels how we can get information, it's easier for academia to get information and move on with their research and prescriptions to some of the ills that bedevil our society.
You've been a deputy minister for some time, and I think per your output, you are now in no time going to be the substantive minister. Have you identified any key challenge or some challenges, and what do you intend to do to deal with all those challenges at the ministry? Thank you.
Yes,
Chairman, thank you. And I say this not of the now, but of the government of Ghana's posture towards communication over various administrations. I believe that communication is about 50% of our politics and governance exercise. The people you want to work for, we must clearly understand what they are looking for, what stakeholders are seeing, what has been decided, how it will be rolled out. And therefore, I think that communication needs to be put at a very strategic level and also resourced accordingly over various administrations. And I have, while I practice as a media person, engaging with other former ministers, and even from my own experience, we can do a lot more to resource communication, state communication very well, not for propaganda purposes, but to get a deeper understanding of the interactions between people and government and what government really intends. Because if we don't, and somebody goes out there and tells the people something else, then you now have to fight a battle of trying to correct the wrong impressions before you explain to the people what the real things. It will make our work a lot easier, and that's one challenge I'm hoping to engage stakeholders to help us.
Chairman, just to, without interrupting the Honorable Barbara, are you, by your answer to the Honorable Barbara's question, asking for increased budgetary allocation or more work to do as Minister for Communication?
I won't turn it down if I get it.
Yes, I don't know why. After that, Kojo, I'll come to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Let me also congratulate Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah on your nomination to the Ministry of Information. Just to pick up from the last question that Honorable Barbara asked, in some jurisdictions, the information minister also doubles as the national intelligence minister, because the information minister has the apparatus across the country through infrastructure such as Information Services Department, journalists, and etc., to gather intelligence and measure the national pulse and inform the president and etc. Do you foresee, as a Minister of Information, the chance of pushing for the Information Ministry to assume this posture?
No, Chairman.
I won't just accept a no answer. Why no?
Honorable, can you ask your second question, Evany? Are you done?
Oh, no.
Then ask your second question.
Yes, the second question. Okay. I have been there before. One of the problems that you will have is how to manage colleague ministers, the way they manage information in their ministries. And I heard you mention a plan that you have. Can you let us into what that plan is? In some jurisdictions that I have studied, the information minister appoints the press secretaries of every minister and controls them and receives reports and determines when a statement is issued, how they respond to issues, so that government communication can be well coordinated. Here you find situations where Information Service Department officers in ministries have been turned into protocol officers. What is your plan? How do you deal with this problem? Otherwise, it will be difficult.
Chairman, thank you. I think I mentioned earlier that we have a strategic plan that was developed under my predecessor, Minister, the Honorable Dr. Hamid, which captures matters like this, how to get a proper legal framework around the Information Service Department and its functions, including the appointment of PROs to government offices and where they should be properly situated, what functions, so that they can be apprised with the information. Because if they are not in a place where the information is available and they are not accountable to us at the Information Ministry, there's absolutely no way the Information Minister will get that information, package it, and be able to keep the various stakeholders informed that this is the next project of government, this is where we are on this or that. So it is part of the strategic plan. We expect to implement and get the blessing of Parliament eventually so that we can achieve this.
Lastly, there's the issue of trust. To be able to get the Information Ministry working through the ISD to have an effective relationship with the ministers, there's that key question of trust. I mean, the president is appointing you as his information minister because he trusts you. There's an ISD director. How do you deal with that in the relationship between the ministers and Information Service Department staff of the various agencies so that they will use them?
Chairman, thank you. I think the question of trust correlates very highly with the question of, or the answer of professionalism. I think that people in the public services should strive to be seen as going straight by the book. Because when political actors have the view that this particular public officer panders to the whims and caprices of one side or the other, then you have the temptation for political actors to interfere and say, I want to bring in my own press secretary, I want to bring in my own this or that. You would notice that in some of the other functions in the public services, it is such that when you go into a ministry, you will not be tempted to change a particular officer there because you know that the work is done diligently. We are also starting this exercise of trying to put a proper legal framework, trying to retool, reorient our people so that their professionalism will show and bring some confidence to bear on all other actors so that that trust is engendered.
In the face of this social media, do you still think that the Ghana News Agency need to be retooled so it fits into this current social context?
Indeed, all media houses, including the state-owned media, need to be orienting themselves along these lines. I'm happy to know that, for example, Parliament is doing same. Parliament is now live on social media. So sometimes even when you are not in the jurisdiction and you want to follow parliamentary business, you can still go on social media and watch live parliamentary proceedings. It is a necessity today, and not just the Ghana News Agency, but all other media, both state and non-state, should look closely to that space so that they can reach out to people some more.
Definitely. I have two more. Thank you very much. FDB succeeded in moving all alcoholic beverages, the advert of all alcoholic beverages to deep in the night. Now, when you are giving the nod, will you assure us that some of the social programs and some adverts which are not good for the youth could also be pushed to somewhere deep in the night where our children are supposedly asleep?
Chairman, thank you. The broadcasting standards of the NMC, the advertising code of the AAG, spell out what can and cannot be done at certain hours. I think the answer is in ensuring that we enforce those. The Minister of Information works closely with the Advertising Association and the National Media Commission, and I'm hopeful that in that office I'll be able to collaborate with them to enforce what their standards say already.
And my last one is that one of the major roles of the media is to ensure good governance. And I'm talking about the print media. Most of the time, you realize that they bring the horrific and then the bad news up, and then the good news of government, and for that matter, Africa, down. Most people don't get time to even roll through to see the good things government is doing. When giving the nod, will you fashion out a plan to make sure that at least they turn it the other way around for the interest of governance, for good governance, and for our people? Because you open the media, the this and then
you have asked the question. Let you answer. Don't answer it.
Chairman, thank you. We can't dictate to the media what content to publish. The only thing we can do is to help enhance the capacities of those who do the stories that I think you think should be published some more.
No, I will congratulate him. You know, he would do a good job as Goebbels, you know. But the issue I want to ask you is, why? Goebbels is a name of a former information minister during the, I won't conclude. Fake news. Fake news is a terrible thing for societies like ours. It can create immediate war between various sections of the community. Do you think that we should have legislation to deal with fake news in particular?
A bit of background and then I'll answer specifically. From my philosophical understanding of what the media as a fourth estate of the realm ought to be, we should not even be having fake news. If indeed we are all doing our work as is expected of us, then the elements of the society that choose to publish false news, or what today we would describe as fake news to the extent of either defaming in the civil context or causing panic and fear, there are laws to deal with them. I think, however, the democratization of media through social media or new media now allows people also to publish this false news, and you cannot even trace or track where exactly it's coming from because it's all over the place and everybody is sharing it. In Kenya, as I mentioned, they have passed a cyber security act. They view it as a cyber security threat. And there are clear provisions that if you share false news, there are consequences to it. Now, there are some who say, oh, that's a bit draconian. Why would you do that? But the other question is, but why would you want to share false news? So if you don't intend to share false news, you don't have to worry about that particular story. Because today we are all being used as news spreading outlets. And nobody's taking responsibility of, is it true or false? And we're all just sharing. I saw it as, I forwarded it as received. And we've all become participants in sharing false news. In the past, you hold the broadcaster accountable. But today, because of the democratization of media, everybody is sharing and nobody's taking responsibility. So in some jurisdictions like Kenya, that act has been passed.
Chairman, Honorable Lecturer, let me interrupt you. I've heard you reference some jurisdictions like Kenya. What will you do as minister to check this?
Chairman, as I said, I was given a background to create context, and then I would make my point. I share the view that we should begin to legislate against false news on social media. I share that view.
What kind of legislation would you advocate for? Will it also be cyber security related as in Kenya?
Yes.
Or you want to punish unethical behavior with abuse of the cyberspace? Give us a commitment.
Today, there are laws to deal with defamatory conduct and publishing false news in the general space. The fake news that we are talking about is often in the cyberspace. And I am very, very attracted to the thought of considering how we can legislate against the sharing of fake news in the cyberspace as part of the cybersecurity risks that we must look at and contain. I'm very open to that proposal.
Chairman, can we have an assurance from the minister that probably subject to the present clearance, your first visit with members of our Committee on Communication would be to Kenya to come and do best practice in Ghana? Give us a commitment. Will you?
No, I'll not commit him to any assurance of a committee's travel. He's not a member of the communications. You'll be supervising him. Okay. So when you decide and he can afford, he'll support you. Yes. Honorable Lecturer, continue.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nominee, you see, we have online publications these days, and people have set up online publications. Do we have sufficient registration provisions for us to know who is publishing online and what they publish?
There are various ways of knowing that, Chairman. There are many of them that are publicly known as to where they come from. But once it's an online publication, even if we did not know who it was coming from, we would have an IP address that directs us to where it is taking place, save for those that are operating beyond our jurisdiction. And if it is not a matter that threatens our security, but falls within the issues of defamation, etc., like I mentioned, there are laws locally and internationally to deal with that. But if they affect our security, and even if they are being published from outside our jurisdiction, there are international security platforms that allow us to make a report and have it attended to. At the lower levels, for example, when you find somebody using fake accounts of yours, even the companies that operate those platforms allow you to report and then they take it off. And at the higher levels, when if it comes to URLs, etc., again, you can make reports to the necessary hosting companies, and it can be dealt with.
You mentioned as part of your strategy to disseminate government information through town hall meetings. But the town hall meetings that I have seen your ministry carry out since last year have been so partisan that only MPP supporters and members attend. What will you do differently to encourage the rest of society to attend?
Chairman, I'm grateful, and with very great respect to my senior, who knows why I smiled before he asked his first question, I will contest that view that it's only MPP members who have been attending the town hall meetings. It cannot be the case. The town hall meetings are organized by the Information Service Department that goes around the local community to announce and to advertise the town hall meetings and invite the general public to attend these town hall meetings. The general public, without regard to political coloration, is given an opportunity to engage with the government actors who are coming there. And indeed, we go to the full extent to make it non-partisan. However, if he's asking us to ensure that it doesn't take a party color or it doesn't become partisan politics there, even the subjects that are discussed there are not partisan matters. They are matters about the government of Ghana and what it is doing and the feedback that the people have. And some of these town hall meetings have been very heated. I'm sure you have seen clips on television where, people have come to criticize the government and demand things of the government. We are happy to encourage such a platform because that's what gives us feedback to correct our acts, and we would go ahead to ensure that it doesn't take a partisan nature.
Honorable Kojo, I'll give the last one to you. I'm not recognizing certain people. So. Honorable Kojo, yes, you have one last.
Thank you, Chairman. Honorable nominee, World Happiness Report 2018 ranks Ghana in the 108th position. And it's sad to note that it puts the country even behind countries like Libya, Cameroon, Gabon, Ivory Coast, Pakistan, Iran, Palestine, and so on. And my question is, are we that sad people, or we have over-communicated our problems to the world and under-communicated our achievements, leading to this?
Chairman, happiness is a concept. I unfortunately haven't read the World Happiness Report. I haven't seen the rubrics of how they have measured happiness or sadness. I am incapable of providing an answer to the question. Indeed, last year, I committed to assist my minister in his exercise to retool the Information Service Department. Remember, I gave a history of how we've come far and how things were. And I'll pay tribute to him today for the kind of leadership that he showed, especially in developing quite a broad framework of a strategic plan. One of the first things we had to do last year was to computerize the various information offices across the country. It was a computerization exercise that my colleague, the Honorable Dukua, my boss at the time, myself, worked very closely on, and we provided computers to all the regional and I think district information officers across the country, so that now in terms of information flow and getting work done, we are better equipped than before. That was the first step. We are at the second step where there's this local concept in the Akan areas called Aban Sini. I grew up in an Akan area, so that's the name I'll recall, Aban Sini, where people have an opportunity to see for themselves what the government of Ghana is doing and engage in a small discussion and also give feedback. That is the next step of where we are. And I am sure that I'll have the support of my colleagues, the Honorable Pius Hajide and my colleague, the Honorable Dokwa, so that we achieve this next stage of the plan as well.
Leadership.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chairman.
I just want to continue from where Honorable Cabo left. The objective for which the GNA, that's Ghana News Agency, and the Information Services Department were the main reason why they were established. Whether you could take us through.
The Information Service Department is the Information Service Department of the Ministry of Information. It is the delivery or executing arm of the ministry. There's the administrative class of the ministry, but the department that is responsible for actually going out there to get government information to the ground is the Information Service Department. It's responsible for engaging with stakeholders, both through mass media and on the ground, getting government message to ground and getting feedback for government on all that government is doing. Then we have agencies. The agencies include the Ghana News Agency, the GNA, as you mentioned, the Ghana Publishing Company, which is for publishing, even until recently, Graphic Corporation, New Times, GBC, etc. But many of them no longer require our subvention. So the one that we are critically dealing with is the Ghana News Agency. Now, their mandate, initially as it was established, was to be a news aggregator. So the Ghana News Agency was responsible for getting stories from across the country, packaging them together, and supplying those stories as a news agency to news houses that were looking for stories. So international news houses and then the local news houses at the time. Over the decades, the market has changed the dynamics a little bit. So today you have a lot of private media houses that don't necessarily require the GNA to tell them a story before they can actually publish that story. So if the GNA is still relying on being a news aggregator, it will not find space within the changed landscape. Part of the work we are doing under this strategic plan, as I mentioned, is to also reorient the Ghana News Agency to, among other things, make it or to enable it to focus heavily on digital news publication and retail news publication, so that they are not just looking at selling bulk news to GBC or to some other news house, but they are also literally trying to get the government message across to you, the receiver, at the end of the day, trying to acquire you as a viewer or listener, as a reader, and get the message to you. Because the GNA can make the story available to the media or the mainstream private media, but the mainstream private media may not be interested in that story. They may be interested in another story. And if government is waiting and relying that GNA will publish our stories for people to, amplify, our message will never get out. So what we need to do is to get GNA to become a mainstream media house out there, also reaching the people with our message as well. And the ISD retool it so that it can get message to ground and get us feedback.
Do you think they are well-resourced?
We have not been well-resourced for a while now. And we are gradually, indeed, the ISD staff themselves openly say that that the year 2017 gone by the time we finished the year, that it was one of the years in which they have seen the highest level of investment. As I mentioned, their computerization program, etc. But even that, we ourselves are clear, is not the full hog. There's a lot more that we need to do to retool them so that they can do a stronger job out there.
Well, so this takes me to, do you have private houses sending reps as reporters from the seat of government?
Yes, private media houses are also accredited to the seat of government.
And when government machinery is moving around, usually you carry them along, right?
That is so.
And you allowance them or you pay them allowances for carrying them around?
I am not aware that they are paid allowances.
When you travel abroad, sometimes you travel with them. Are they not carried by the state to wherever you are going?
Some are carried by the state as part of the president's press pool.
You were in Joy FM and you were, at a point in time, an editor, right?
That is so.
So you know that you send people to the presidency to cover news.
I know that.
And you said that you don't know whether they pay them allowances.
Because I was not responsible for that schedule. I was an editor for the schedule of my morning show, not for the main newsroom that sends correspondence to the seat of the president.
But at one time, you were you were supposed to even develop the business section of the Joy FM. So at least in management meeting, you discuss these things, your reporters that go out, and what happens to them.
Multimedia has had and still has a very strict policy on that you do not take money from principals that you report stories from. That is a policy as I knew it to be then. I'm not aware if that policy has changed or whether people who travel on public beats are given allowance.
Well, so when the presidency is traveling abroad with them, is it that Joy FM that buys their ticket?
No, as I mentioned, they will travel as part of the president's press pool if they are selected for that particular travel. It's a press pool that is rotated, and if they are selected, they will travel as part of the president's press pool.
When you say is the news pool that rotates, is it rotated by the president or by the individual private
No, the director of communications at the presidency has a rotation schedule and rotates who's going on this trip and who goes on the next trip.
The reason why I'm just saying this, I mean, not this government, I'm just talking about for over a decade now, we've had the practice of doing this when GNA, the Ghana News Agency, is there, information services are all struggling to get resources. And we do this to the private broadcasters who come to the presidency and indirectly weaken that of the state that these people are persons that we are paying. I think that it is worth looking at what we are doing for, because obviously I want to believe that in many democracies around the world, when private companies set up news media and they want to go and get information, they don't expect the state to support it. They have to do that on their own. If you want to support them, like you said, with the fund, you can do that separate because of the possibility of influencing the kind of stories that they churn out. So I hope that as we are going there, you take the opportunity to look at what can be done to sanitize that area and strengthen Ghana News Agency, at least with the little resources that you have.
I hear you, Chairman, and I take it in good faith. Just suffice to say that globally, the best practice is that you will still carry public service broadcasters along with you, but you will still carry a selection of the private press pool anytime the president is traveling or a high dignitary of that kind. However, your point is spot on that we have to do a lot more to empower and maybe even give some exclusive space also to the state agencies so that they also have viability. Point well taken.
Generally, I mean, use the fund if it's established, the fund that has been established. You said currently there's no money in it to build capacity of the media as the fourth estate of, as the fourth arm that supports the democracy that we have. In which specific area are you looking at building their capacity?
Thank you, Chairman. So, Chairman, the final product is a product, not just as I mentioned it, but it's a product as agreed between GIBA, GJ, NMC, School of Communication Studies, the GIJ, etc., because it ought just not to be my view or where I think gaps are, but what the collective thinks. But even while we tidy that one up, we are clear in our minds that, for example, there's a need to bridge the gap in production. Some of the largest audience shares you will find are with our morning programs in the country. Both, in fact, for television, the largest, for radio, the largest audiences are for the morning programs. And you want to go into the kind of production that goes into it, the kind of factual material that goes into it, how we can help media houses build the kind of research capacities that are required. So research is one area, so that they have the actual material to work with. And then we can also tone down on people's personal opinions, innuendos and other, may I say, theatrics, which are important in the trade, no doubt. But if we're of the view, and I am personally of that view, but I desire for the collective to agree with me, to build research capacity and analytics capacity, those are areas, production capacity, editorial capacity, those are areas that we seek to help build people's capacity on. We also seek to build capacity on specialized areas. One of the things that we'd like to encourage the media doing moving forward is for people to specialize in areas. Because if you're a generalist, sometimes even the nuances in the subject area are lost on you. But if you have expertise in a particular area, you can specialize. It's like a lawyer reporting on whether the court has given judgment or the judge has made a ruling on a particular application. There's a world of a difference when you hear a lawyer reporting on it and when you hear a general reporter trying to report. Sometimes the nuance between what is a judgment and what is a ruling on an application is missing. But as we help people to build specific capacity, is it health, is it education, is it law, is it finance, then the content that they will churn out will be content that we'll all be increasingly excited about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to take you into your debate on the floor. You still serve on the Finance Committee, right?
That is so.
Earlier, you said there were a lot of misreportage. Now I have the answers. I want to refer you. Some of them, if you want me to quote, I'll just quote, but I'll just paraphrase them. When you were debating on 21st of November 2017, the official report of Parliament, the paragraph or the page is 3480. And you were talking about reckless borrowing when you were debating in 2017. I just wanted to know your thought. One, which were some of the loans that you thought? Because, I mean, I remember very well that in opposition you were very vocal and also singing the chorus. Some of the loans that you thought were reckless, and whether you thought those reckless loans have stopped.
Chairman, thank you. And I'm very excited that leader has raised this matter here. The matter of reckless borrowing, as I sought to say on the floor, in which today you give me an opportunity to explain some more, is a matter that even today's minority has had opportunity. My very good friend, the Honorable Atufosin, has had opportunity to even speak about, that we should not borrow to unsustainable limits. And there are two measures of that. One is the annual deficit that we are running, and two is the level of debt sustainability, which is debt to GDP ratio. It is my view, and it is a view that the minority has actually publicly agreed with, that if we cross the 70% threshold, we are being reckless in how we are managing our borrowing. When I said reckless borrowing, I was referring to borrowing that takes us beyond the 70% threshold. I believe that we are all encouraging ourselves to come down and to also reduce the annual rate of debt accumulation. That is the context within which I refer to reckless borrowing.
Mr. Chairman, this is very interesting. Do you know the ratio, the debt to GDP in the U.S.?
I'm informed that I think it's above 100%.
What of Japan?
I don't have that figure readily.
But maybe probably might have heard it also around 100. So do you say that is the best measure of describing something as reckless, or it is the project that you are going to put the money into?
Chairman, it is one of the measures for debt sustainability, and for the purposes of that debate, that was what I referred to.
Mr. Chairman, I take him to the other debate that he spoke in the official report on 23rd of July, 2018. That's very recently. And the column is 4157, where you were talking about the converting of the National Health Insurance Levy and then the GET Fund. And you were saying that, oh, they will only stand alone, but they will have the same effect, and therefore it will not change anything. Now the implementation has started. Do you still believe that it will stand, it is the same thing, it will just stand alone, the impact will still be the same? Or now that the implementation has started, you have now realized that the impact is not the same?
Chairman, leader started by referring to the paragraph. I would crave your indulgence that he refreshes my memory and the memory of this committee on the exact words I used, and then I'll respond to his question.
Government is seeking to convert the GET Fund and National Health Insurance Levy still as the same rate, but to stand alone, levies that are not subject to the input-output computation.
Chairman, I'm grateful, and I sought the guidance of leader in reading the specific words because I said it will still stay at the same rate. The rates have not changed. The only thing that has changed is that it's no longer subject to the input-output mechanism. And as he has read from the exact words I used, that was my intendment in the debate.
Is the rate the same?
Yes, Chairman, the rate is the same. It is only the input-output mechanism that is no longer being applied.
So, Mr. Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah, you have a financial background. Many of us don't. And I want to believe that a lot of people in Ofuase, IRB constituency are listening and watching you. Are the rates the same if you are charging 2.5% as value added and you are charging 2.5% on the quantum of the money itself, on the cost of the product itself? Is the rate the same?
Chairman, I spoke in a context, and the context was that the rates remain the same, but it is only no longer being subjected to the input-output mechanism. I think that when you put it in that context, my words are quite understandable, Leader.
Mr. Chairman, Kojo knows that he's just doing gimmicks. Because Mr. Chairman, I beg you.
That's what he said. And you ask your question.
Yes, let me ask him this. When it was as value-added tax, it meant that if you bought a product at 10 cedis and you've added a value of 5 cedis, the tax was on the 5 cedis. Kojo, am I right? When it was the VAT.
You will be correct.
Now, the 2.5% that you claim stands the same and the rate is the same. That is no longer on the 5, but on the 10. Does this give you the same rate?
The only difference is that in the first scenario that you mentioned, you are applying the input and output mechanism. In the second scenario that you have mentioned, you are no longer applying the input and output mechanism. If I just may go a bit further, in all revenue measures of this kind, the objective is to raise more revenue for the state. So there will be an incidence of tax. There is a question between who bears the incidence of tax. And usually, when between the producer and the consumer, the numbers are done, the state will get that extra revenue without unduly overburdening any individual. So my words in that debate, as they were, remain clear today, Chairman, that the rates remain the same. It is just that under the current regime, it is no longer subject to the input-output mechanism.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, let me just have Honorable Kojo. Would that lead to pay more or you'll be paying the same?
I do believe that in the instance of some products, people will pay a bit more. In the instance of other products where the producer, based on the elasticity of the product, is of the view that he cannot increase the prices and has to be the one to absorb that incidence of tax, the product price will not go up.
Mr. Chairman, Kojo is struggling to confuse his constituents. But let me just take it. Kojo, on the 8th of March, 2017, column 2354, you said something that I have consistently agreed, but I just want to ask you, where you said that government is going to make savings of about 1 billion with the new regime about tax exemption. And you went further to say that that savings alone is enough to account for many of the expenses that have been projected. You said on the finance committee, you said earlier, yes. And over the 2 years, you've still seen tax exemption running to the House. And virtually in 2017, while you said, which I strongly agree with you, has not happened. Now you are going as a full minister and probably, and I'm sure you'll be sitting in cabinet. will you remind the finance minister about this promise in 2017 and how you, in your word, is seeping out needed revenue for government?
Chairman, thank you. It's a subject that I'm very passionate about, and I'm happy the question has been raised. Specific context, in that budget debate, we're talking about a new policy procedure that was being introduced that says you pay and then you come and claim. And we're saying that that could help us cut back on due claims of about 1 billion Ghana cedis. In that same budget, if my memory serves me right, spending on Free Senior High School, our flagship social intervention program, was projected around 400 million Ghana cedis. And so when I say that it is enough to cover for some of the expenses that we are projecting in that budget, it is because you would recall the debate about where are you going to find the money to fund some of these things. And it is within that context that I speak. But you are right. The big matter is also a matter of tax exemptions and how we sometimes unduly let it pass. I'm sure you have no problems with me even revealing to the committee and the nation that you and I have had discussions on it. And collectively, we have been talking about how we can reduce how much tax exemptions that are provided. The question now is, how do we do it? And I think currently there are about 2 schools of thought. There are those who believe that we should actually come up with a tax exemption policy that spells out how it should be done and how some things must not be allowed through. Indeed, the finance minister, with great respect, would not need reminding on it because he is championing that cause with his deputy, my brother, the Honorable Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah. There are those who also believe that actually it is a power of parliament under Article, I think, 296 of the Constitution. No, under 296. And leader, if I just may explain, 174, the power to levy taxation. But there are those who interpret it to mean that apart from the statutory tax exemptions, which you'll find in the GIPC Act, the Free Zones Act, etc., apart from the statutory ones, all the others we do are discretionary tax waivers, which are given at the discretion of Parliament, because the executive can only literally request. Parliament is the one that grants that waiver. So it's an exercise of discretionary power under Article 296, which requires, therefore, that Parliament comes up with guidelines on what matters require tax exemption and what matters don't require. I think that the 2 matters are out there. I know the finance minister has been very animated on how to plug that gap, and I'm expecting actually to see some action on it shortly because Cabinet has directed some action on it. I'm expecting that it will filter through to us. But there's another school of thought which maybe if Parliament decides to, at the point of engagement, consider, we may find a joint way forward.
I just want to find out from you whether what the minister said in 2017, you pay and then you now try to claim, has started.
It did start. And I think a few months to the end of the year, the decision was made not to continue it in the next budget cycle, which is the 2018 budget cycle, but to also adopt other means to try and close that exemption loophole. Chairman, thank you. They are on track. They are having a multiplex on which they are transmitting currently, but there's a need for the nation to answer its DTT questions finally. The new minister, I'm aware, has engaged with stakeholders and has given timelines by which we should stop the double broadcast on the initial platforms and then on the DTT platforms. It's my expectation that once that is completed, we will not even have this double transmission problem, which even includes GTV.
But do you have an idea when this will be completely done?
The timelines that the minister has given them is that they complete the migration process, I think, by the end of 2018. And it is my expectation that they'll work in accordance with that timeline.
What about the radio? Because there was equally the move from analog, even with radio, to digital.
I'm sure it will fall within the same timeline.
Have you seen radio being done digitally?
Yes. If you go on the multi-TV boxes, you have radio channels that are also transmitted on those boxes. Even on the digital televisions, you'll find radio channels on the digital televisions.
Now, I just want to find out, how do you intend to deal with GTV with regards, the collaboration between your ministry, GIBA, NCA, and the Media Commission with regards to this issue of start times?
Chairman, thank you. I think that exercise is led by the Ministry of Communications. We, because of the content issues, we have also been involved. The engagement is going. I was at the last meeting myself. The engagement is ongoing. Parties around the table have an opportunity to express their views and inhibitions, and we try to work, towards a middle ground. I'm expecting that the process will continue so that we're able to wrap up the migration as the Honourable Minister has instructed by that deadline.
Chairman, assuming rightly so that the nominee is an elected member of parliament and therefore statutorily he meets the constitutional requirement of being MP and minister. Suffice it to add that he has been at the Ministry of Information, albeit in the capacity of a deputy minister. And since he will be government spokesperson, words matter to us, as words must be honored. May I refer you to the Hansard of 21st November 2017. I'll quote verbatim. Mr. Speaker, in our analysis, we need to be consistent over the years. If I have few minutes, I'll point them out. In the year 2011, Ghana achieved GDP growth of 14%. A word used by the government of the day was unprecedented. Do you know of any other precedent other than this in the growth trajectory of the economy?
I'm not aware of any. That's why I refer to the words used at the time.
Why did you have problems with the use of the word unprecedented?
Chairman, I did not have problems with it.
Is that a material fact or not?
I do not understand the question, Chairman.
You used the words and said unprecedented. You know of any precedent where the growth trajectory is not higher than this, for the record? Do you? Are you aware of it?
He has answered that already. He says there's none.
Chairman, I'm interested in his answers.
Yes.
For the record, I know why I'm placing emphasis.
Very well.
You know of a precedent?
Chairman, as I mentioned earlier, it is because I do not know of any other precedent. That's why I refer to the words that had been used by the government of the day, that the government of the day described it as unprecedented.
And you didn't have problems with it?
No.
Do you know the state of TV license regime in Ghana, having been deputy minister, and the problems associated with its collection?
It was not my schedule, Chairman. I am generally aware that there's a law that allows for it. There was an attempt made recently to appropriate TV license fees from citizens. The process of engaging with the public and other stakeholders, it is my understanding, were not exhausted, and it created an uproar around it. That is how much information I have on it.
Under your watch, can we be assured of an audit to ascertain how much has come in as a result of the new license regime?
Chairman, I shall not obstruct the constitutional provisions for audits in the public services in any way.
You will respect the audit outcomes?
That is so.
You will be chief spokesperson for the president, one factory, one district. We have one district, one factory. I have in my hand here the agenda for jobs change. Has there been any increases in taxes in Ghana as deputy minister that you are aware of?
Chairman, I'm aware the administration has cut a lot of taxes in our 2017 budget, as our friends in the minority assisted us in passing on the floor of the House. I am aware also that we have introduced some limited specific tax measures. For example, the African Union levy, which was introduced to help Ghana meet some of its AU and other international subscriptions. So it's a balanced scale, a lot more, but a couple of limited revenue measures.
The private sector of Ghana is listening to you. The business community is listening to you. Are there any anticipated increases in taxes?
Chairman, the leader is asking me to speak for the finance minister.
Asking question in anticipation is a breach of our rules. Kindly ask another question.
Chairman, my first question was, are there increases in taxes?
Honorable Leader, taxes can only be by law. So anticipation in lawmaking.
I'm not anticipating because it's a past event. It's a sequel I'm leading him to. And therefore, let him answer. Are there increases in taxes? He's Minister for Information.
Let's be clear what question you're asking. Are you asking, are there or is expected? Which one? Be clear.
Has there been? From taxation to production.
Chairman, I answered that question, and I said that this Parliament, with the help of our friends in the minority, helped us to pass a number of tax reductions in the 2017 budget. Again, this Parliament, with the help of our friends from the minority, helped us to pass a number of limited revenue measures, including the African Union levy, which we...
Will that limited intervention result in increased taxation?
Chairman, the African Union levy that we passed was aimed at, I think, levying about, 1% or 0.5% for purposes of paying African Union levies and other international levies. Of course, naturally, that 0.5 will be an uptick. But my point I'm making is that it's a net. You look at that on one side, and you look at the other measures that have been done to cushion the Ghanaian and the Ghanaian business community. And so it's a balance. It's not an either-or situation.
You will be Minister for Information. The Macaulay women are listening to you. Traders at Abosoka are listening to you. Importers and exporters are listening to you. Are there increases in taxes for them as citizens of Ghana?
Chairman, I believe I have answered this question about 3-4 times, that it is a balance. There have been a lot more decreases in taxes and some limited revenue measures.
Limited what? You are comfortable to use decreases. The other one is revenue measure. Will there be increases in taxation? We want it for a record.
Chairman, will there be, the finance minister would announce in the next budget.
So the traders in Abosokai and importers and exporters have your word that there is no and there will be no. And as Minister for...
Honorable Leader, his answer is that the finance minister will announce the budget. So we will have the opportunity. Honorable members, order. Honorable members, order. His answer was that the finance minister will announce the budget. And it's only a few weeks away from here. It will be announced in Parliament anyway, so we'll find out soon.
Relative to the present pledge, whether in collaboration with the private sector or government on its own, is to address issues of unemployment with one district, one factory. Do you today consider that a pimple on the arse of progress or a monumental achievement of the administration?
And Chairman, I want some clarity. Is it the promise that he's referring to or something else that he's referring to? Leader, if you can help me.
You may be required tomorrow by the President to brief the Ghanaian people on the status of its implementation. Will you accept it as a pimple of progress as a pimple on the arse of progress or a monumental achievement as a major policy initiative?
Chairman, sorry, Randa. I don't understand the question. Can you clarify, break down, because can you please?
What is the state of one district, one factory?
Yes, Honorable Minister, please.
Chairman, I provided a full brief a couple of weeks ago to the people of Ghana. I would request of the committee to give me room to fetch those briefing notes and appraise the committee with same.
Events leading to when the president wrote to Parliament, the first paragraph of his letter was instructive: reorganization in his government. Now, in relating to a question asked by the Honorable Soyini on employment statistics and numbers, must we rely on your word or the word of the Minister for Employment?
Chairman, both of us speak for government. I may speak generally for government. He will speak specifically for government on employment matters. It is what he says that I will amplify. And so it is my expectation that whatever numbers he puts out at the end of this year will respond or will correspond with whatever numbers that I also amplify.
Not until, Chairman, this one have to pay royalties. Not until you develop some problem sitting. You would not appreciate the essence of what we are sitting on here. But when there is a boil on it, you would appreciate it. Director General for GBC, you know the circumstances that led to the contract termination relative to what your ministry role should be against the NMC?
Chairman, as I mentioned, that was not my schedule. I'm not appraised with the details of that.
So as Deputy Minister, you are not apprised with every happening at the Ministry of Information. Is that the case?
Not every happening. What falls under my schedule, I am very acquainted with it. What fell under...
What is your schedule?
Other colleagues' schedule, they were also very appraised with it.
What is your schedule?
I was responsible for policy communications and for developing the new platforms of the ministry that allow us to engage with the general public, like the national policy summits, like the town hall meetings, as I mentioned. I was also responsible for speaking for the economy, in addition to my administrative roles. The agencies of the ministry fell under another colleague's purview, and therefore the specific details may be available there. It's my hope that when I assume the reins as the substantive minister, I will get fully appraised with all of these.